Hello. I want to talk about Saturday afternoons many years ago, when my sister and I would used to leave school on a Saturday lunchtime. We had to go to school on Saturday mornings. Um, I had to study divinity or religious studies on Saturday mornings, and we would talk about well, we were taught about history to do with the Bible and about various confrontations to do with the Sadducees and Pharisees and the House of David and things like that. A political take on the background behind the Bible, somewhat. But there were also discussions about Jesus, and particularly focusing on a book called What Manner of Man, which was a really very good book and very good reading and studying. It was a pleasure to be involved in thinking about the Bible and comparing the various New Testament accounts of Jesus's life and getting to know how they differed from each other, and asking philosophical questions, really, and inquiring questions. We weren't forced into dogma at Queen Margaret's. We were encouraged to compare and contrast and think and ask questions. So I would leave with my sister on a Saturday lunchtime, probably about 1 o'clock, get the bus back from Escrick into town, and we would be the only people, more or less, in town in school uniform on a Saturday. So in a way, we were very recognizable and self-conscious. I didn't actually, if I tell the truth, have many other clothes apart from my school uniform. I did go riding and had a pony, but I would wear old jeans um, for riding in and mucking out and so on. And I used to go there on a night time. And it was quite late at night because we didn't get home from school either on a daytime till sometimes about 7 o'clock at night. And then I would cycle from the age of about 12, about 3 miles, um, in the dark, sometimes on a winter time, to go and muck out my pony. So I remember it was a very active time. I was very active and had to be, and enjoyed being active when I was younger. But anyway, sometimes I did feel overwhelmed. But anyway, yes, we went into town, and often my mother would meet us in town and invite us into the Danish kitchen, which was a cafe in town, which was mostly decked out with orange lounger type chairs, sofas, um, like a galley, like a ship's galley, with um, wooden uh, window hangings. And it was lovely in there, and it came to be a miracle later on, because somehow, for very many years, until sadly it did close down quite recently, but for very many years it stayed open. And somehow the man who owned it managed to keep refurbishing it in exactly the same decor as far as the vinyl orange sofas went as there were there originally. And it was miraculous for that. And I was very grateful for it. For someone, although he did add a conservatory area, and that was lovely as well. But for someone not to want to refurbish all the time, but to want to be able to access the same materials and an update on the same furnishing that was there originally, I thought it was a wonderful achievement. Because I'm sure those sofas would have been changed. They would have been ripped. He would have somehow he managed to refurbish the chairing, the seating. It wasn't chairing. It was very quite plush, comfortable sofas, and I would have often an open prawn sandwich with my mother and sister. And later we would go into town, and I might see a lad whose nickname was Ozzy, maybe after the Wizard of Oz, though he did somewhat like heavy metal. I don't know whether he really was into Ozzy Osbourne. His nickname was Ozzy, and often he'd catch sight of myself or my sister or both of us somewhere outside Woolworths area in York, and he wouldn't ignore us, and that was just so. I was so grateful for that, because most people would ignore us because we weren't sort of dressed up in top shop outfits or whatever. We look different. And he was nice to me. And entered me into conversation and so on. He didn't ignore me. Yeah. And then we would go home later, and my mum might have brought a shoe bun for us both and put it in the fridge from Marks and Spencer's, a lovely shoe bun with custard inside, with drips of chocolate all over it. It was lovely. They were superb. They were so tasty, and we would eat them along with a cup of coffee, watching Brookside on an evening, the quite long episode of Brookside on a Saturday tea time. And it was lovely, and I liked Brookside. I liked it. I know that now that it may have, to some extent, been marketing real estate and suburban life. It was massive, the impact Brookside had, because they were lovely. So it was a lovely suburban setting. Not unlike the house I've been allowed to live in now. And it wasn't sort of rising damp or, that they were lovely suburban houses in Brookside, and a beautiful setting in many respects, and some friendliness between the neighbours. And it was an ideal, and obviously desirable in those days, and still now, to some extent, though I am worried about urban sprawl and the suburb having taken over to some extent, and the lack of amenities in some of the villages around York. Um, I know that corner shops have closed down and things like that, and but yes, watching Brookside was great. I like Channel 4. Channel 4 was then quite a new thing. I remember when I was in a classroom one day being told, look, this is a big day. Channel 4 is beginning. And I liked the right to reply. I really liked that. I watched that avidly. I'd liked it when the woman who later on the BBC, who later went on to become the favourite of the host of the Weakest Link. I didn't like the Weakest Link at all. I hated it. I don't like it when people are rude. I don't like humiliation and or enforced in humiliation on others. I didn't get any kicks from it at all. I didn't like it. But I liked her when she seemed to present her own viewpoint, um, uh, uh, talking about some of the BBC programmes and about the letters that had been written in about them. I liked that programme, but that Channel 4's right to reply went even a stage further. And there were members of the public invited to go into booths and to be able to comment on the TV programmes. There was one in York, and I did even once consider daring to go in it. I didn't, but it was all very exciting.